This should
I
be
nominate you.
to select an interim chairman, chairperson to serve in that capacity until such time.
I second that nomination.
A full-
Let's vote on it.
Vote?
You're done. You're
You don't
toast.
have a quorum, do you?
Yeah, yeah, we got
Oh, you don't
three.
have a quorum?
We have three.
Okay.
Well, our understanding is that 5 is the sort of ordinance number of regular board members, and then there's the subs. So we have 3 of 5. 3 of 5 here.
Okay.
All right, very good. Are we ready to go, Janice?
Yep, you're live.
All right, very
Turn your
good.
mic on.
This is the meeting of the Harbor Committee on April 16th, 2024. This is a public meeting. Minutes are recorded. The meeting is broadcast on Zoom. Is it broadcast on, are
Yep,
we
it's-
Zooming today and recorded by YouTube? Please direct your comments through the chair. Today attending, we have Mark Siegenthaler and Bob Perkins and myself, Elliot Thompson, along with Sophie Romana, our select board liaison. The agenda today.
I would like to repeat what we just apparently did off the record. I would like to nominate Elliot to be the interim chair, whether he likes it or not.
And I seconded.
Okay, all those in favor?
Vote.
Aye. Very good.
Now you can run the meeting.
Okay, so public comment on non-agenda items. Anyone speaking up? No. Okay.
Stephen, you're here, you don't have?
Well, I have about something else, but yes, I do have an on-agenda.
Ah.
Yes, Mr. Gold.
As I have approached the committee several times
Instigator.
over past years, and as recently as last fall, about proposing and doing a project to get some kind of a float system out at Curtis Island.
Yes.
And especially since apparently the Historic District Commission or whatever is about to do extensive work out there, they will need it, but I also think it will ease access to the island for our elderly community.
I would ask a question of anyone who might know. Do you know if we actually, well, first, are you talking about floats with an attached ramp and all that, or what do you think needs?
Yeah, a removable ramp. In order, Taiwan, I can't tell you what I think the actual distance will be, but something that you could actually tie a dinghy to in 3 feet of water, let's say, and get ashore.
So
Because
my,
it's a rocky seaweed mess right now.
my question would be whether we can get Steve or someone to identify whether there is at least an old existing
We did that
float
already.
on town
Yeah.
property somewhere.
Yeah, I think Steve and Mike Scaling already looked at that, already looked at recycling some of the old floats. I think it's a bit more complicated than just recycling old floats. They're looking at solutions. I know we're talking also with 2 Harbor Marines to help us design something there. I actually spoke with Brad this morning about it. So there is something in the works. As we're going to be there's the Friends of Curtis Island are looking at rehabilitating Curtis Island, improving it, doing a lot of work on the building, but also thinking about access to Curtis Island and making sure that it's ADA accessible as much as possible or feasible, and also finding ways to eventually regulate traffic on the island to make sure that it's not, overtaken by. So there's something in the works. You might want to talk to Michael Scaling, Steve, about it. And I think Michael came to the Harbor Committee or is planning on coming to the Harbor Committee to talk about the project and work with the committee. So there's something in the works. The issue we're facing all around the harbor, and I'm pretty sure all of you know that, we don't have any contractors. They're all completely booked. We have a similar issue with the stairs at Lake Beach that we won't be able to repair on time for the season.
And that's even ordinary contractors.
Exactly.
Not Croc Marine
Yeah.
types.
Exactly. So all this is taking a little bit more time because of, shortage of available contractors who can work with us.
Good.
And you say they are working on this. I'm not sure I understand.
So
who
it's
is-
Steve Pixley and Michael Scaling. Michael has a foundation, a 501c3. He's raising money to help with the maintenance of Curtis Island. You don't know about this?
No.
But so we should really have Michael come and present the project. I think it would be super interesting.
The Harbor Committee, I don't know if they were ever included in the loop in any of this effort.
Well, he should. So I'll reach out to Michael and ask him to come and make a presentation.
Okay, that'd be great. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Along with Pixley, I think.
Yeah.
It'd be good to have.
Yeah, it
him.
would be good.
And the harbor master hasn't really shared that information with us in his monthly
he-
harbor
I think
master
he did.
report.
No, he
I've
did.
heard
No, he
in
did.
this room
Yeah.
about Curtis Island sprucing up and public access to it, but not as specifically as Sophie's talking about.
Okay, so that'd be great, Sophie.
Yep.
And then we can put that on maybe our next meeting agenda.
I'll reach out to Michael Scaling and to Pixley and have them come and present about the project at Curtis Island.
Great. How do you spell scaling?
Skaling.
SKAL.
I'm looking at Josh, Master. of-
Google will fix it for you.
Well,
Okay. All right, very good.
I'd just like to add that many years ago, we had a Curtis Island Day where the then Harbor Committee and volunteers ferried people out to the island, citizens that didn't have boats, and it was very successful.
Mhm.
The only disadvantage was some Lighthouse web group got a hold of it, and we got overwhelmed with people.
Yeah, that was a nice day. I was one of the beneficiaries of your service. That was nice. Okay, well, that's great to know.
I do actually have a non-agenda item. Just to and it follows up on that, to let everybody know that this Saturday, we are doing a harbor cleanup. Lyman Morse and the Wharf at Lyman Morse, organizing a harbor cleanup. Basically, show up at 2:00 over there by the travel lift. We'll have little trash picker-uppers. We'll have bags. We'll have dumpsters. And we're basically just going to walk the shore and pick up anything that doesn't belong. And Curtis Island is a perfect example. I hadn't actually thought about it, but anybody who does have a boat in the water this weekend, that would be perfect if somebody could go out there and walk the shore. This is a pretty unscientific thing, but basically if you see some trash, pick it up and let's actually do something.
Wow, that's great. And what time is that?
2:00 on Saturday
And
afternoon.
what's the tide at 2 p.m.?
It's pretty low. Yeah, I think it's low at 1, if I remember correctly.
Uh-huh.
Tried to do it around low tide.
How's-
We're doing Yacht Club Friday and Sunday.
Oh, nice.
Because when I saw
There we
your
go.
email, I'm like,
A lot
oh,
of garbage.
And
That's awesome.
this is there are people convening at Lyman Morse?
Yep, right at the travel lift there at Lyman Morse.
Mhm. What's the date for Saturdays?
The 20th.
20th.
Earth Day, I think, is
Yeah,
Monday.
yeah.
So couldn't quite get Earth Day, but we're
and
close.
lots of cleaning.
Yeah,
efforts this weekend.
okay. Well,
I think
that's
isn't the
great.
Leonard Lookner roadside cleanup is also this weekend. So
That's
Thank
great. Thank you, Josh. Okay, next item is minutes. Thank you, Bob, for preparing the minutes.
I haven't reread them. I hope they're good enough
Okay,
for government work.
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
I second. All those in favor? Minutes 3-0. Okay. Okay, now, Sophie, as our select board liaison, can you share with us what actions the select board is taking to appoint members to the Harbor Committee? We've had vacancies, one vacancy now for 3 to 4 months. We've, of course, had more recent resignations.
Yeah.
And we had the passing of a member.
Yeah.
And actually, before you addressed that. I just wanted to acknowledge the fact that Jim Bennett passed away 2-3 days ago.
Someday. Yeah.
No, no.
Jim Bennett?
Yeah.
Harbor Committee member. And, that's very, very sad. He was a young man.
Yeah.
And,
How old was Jim?
It's in early 70s, I think, right?
Very young.
Very young, exactly. Almost no.
yeah.
No, it's very sad, and it's a big loss for all of us because he was very much involved in resilience discussions and projects around town. He was a board member of the yacht club as well, working on resilience project there and helping us making the yacht club more resilient to the storm. So it's really a very sad
Yes.
loss, and it's also a shock. It took me a
Yes.
couple days to get over.
Okay.
So I think we should find a way to recognize him. I don't know how, but
Okay. We'll have to consider that.
Yeah.
Now we will do it in the minutes.
we will do it in the minutes. So traditionally what we do is we open up an application process, and it's something I actually wanted to revise. So I want to have a conversation with both the select board and Audra to see how we can have an application process that's fair and transparent so people can apply. They know what the time frame is to apply. We know what the process is in the sense of how the Harbor Committee is involved in making a recommendation on the applications and things like that. So I think we need to think this through a little bit more than it was in the past.
So has there been any action taken to replace Tom Griffin?
So Sophie, I agree with the,
We need to have a better process in a word.
well,
Sorry, yeah.
I agree with the process that when it comes to decision time by the select board, open, transparent, and allowing names that aren't familiar to start with an equal shot. But I also think that you're not going to get much of a harbor committee by just putting a public notice. There's got to be recruitment and awareness that, because not everyone does know, aside from Jim dying, they don't know that Bruce and Josh left. So, I think that whether it's the select board or whomever, we need to actually publicize and recruit. And I'll say one other thing.
Yeah.
I also think the select board needs to decide what they want out of this committee, because if it's memorial benches and harbor fees, I'm not going to be recruiting anyone. It's just not that.
I think we need to focus on candidates that have true knowledge of the harbor and operation of it. And
But also users. I mean, users
Yeah, well,
users
that's
have,
one of them.
and exactly, yeah, you're one of them. I'm one of them. I don't think we need people who have been. I think we need people who are using the harbor, whether for kayaking, for fishing, for whatever it is, for commercial, for wind jammering, all those things. All those things are useful. But I think the point that Bob makes is critical, is that the role of the Harbor Committee, you made the same before we started the meeting. And I think making sure that you have a clear mission and clear projects to work on will help with that. So I think there needs to be a little bit more thinking through beyond what's in the ordinance. I know you're going to tell me about the ordinance. And I'm thankful because I cannot read right now. I don't have reading glasses. So
well, I'm having a hard time myself, but
a monkey stole my glasses in Africa. So I'm like completely blind. But I think
That's an excuse
I've
we get all the
All the
time.
time.
I've
I
never
know.
heard that one
I know.
before.
I know. I can show you the monkey actually.
In the ordinance, the definition of the harbor committee is fairly clear on what's required of us. So
Yes,
I think we ought to just review that.
Yes.
And I think we lose sight of that.
Yeah.
And it's important to review it occasionally and review the ordinance.
Yes.
Mhm.
And I think that this is similar to I guess more or less when I was coming on, which is, I don't know how many years ago now. But that this is by fluke an opportunity to reconstitute the board. We're not just patching, a spot. And that requires what Mark's talking about. And I don't know, maybe there's been in the past, but I'm wondering why we don't have a commercial fisherman.
Well,
We
exactly.
talk about them all the time.
I think the working waterfront should be represented. on
Well,
the
I don't
committee.
know as we have many residents that are commercial fishermen.
Fishermen, yeah.
If you
Well,
have a
that
business
maybe-
in the town, you can serve on a town committee.
You know that?
I've read that
Oh.
in the.
I'm
I
looking
believe
at
it's in the
Janice, because
committee
Janice is the,
handbook.
Janice is the guardian of those rules. I mean, when I don't know them,
Do you have to be a town resident to serve on a town committee? Or can you be
A business owner.
person in town?
It should be a resident. I think it does say that someone.
I kind of thought it did.
I believe in the handbook, it mentions business owner or operator.
Well, I think that, there's the obvious, Lyman Morse connection, but there are a lot of other commercial users and regular, not just pleasure boat people who use the harbor all the time, and it's vital to them, and that's part of the sausage making.
Mhm. Yes. Yes, so I have been recruiting personally. I've been talking to a number of people, asking them if they would consider applying for appointment to the Harbor Committee. I haven't got a lot of favorable responses.
So, and I think another thing that ought to be looked at is a well-rounded individual, not somebody that has, say, a personal agenda, but somebody that actually knows and understands the harbor and is interested in it as a community.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think part of the sort of recruitment or filling the positions, which is the cart and which is the horse. And I think that the select board taking some time to say, what do we want from these people? For example, Josh had talked about trying to do sort of a global study of where the harbor's going, not over the next year, but over the next decade or 50 years. And if the select board thinks that this would be an appropriate place to have the conversation start with all sorts of entities, then that is going to be much more attractive to people to get involved with than, well, we got other people to handle all that stuff, and what we really want them to do is to review the benches. Yeah.
no, but I mean, these are all fair points. And I agree with them. I think the Harbor Committee should have a very clear mission and objectives. And yes, there's the ordinance, but we also need to make sure that it's fulfilling for the members, right? So
And
that their contribution is taken into account, or else those committees have no real interest, as you mentioned earlier in our conversation before the gong
Pre-game.
this morning. No, but I mean, look, these are voluntary positions,
Yep.
and people spend time, and the Harbor Committee has spent enormous amounts of time on different projects. As in the short couple of years I've been, your liaison, I know how much work you put in. So it needs to be, those contributions need to be valued. Because if we don't value them, then we can't recruit people, right? Because you're like, well, why would I do this, right? Fair point. So I think if we can take a little bit of time and come back to the Harbor Committee with a better baked cake, Mark?
Any cake's good.
No, not any
The
cake,
better
because,
baked
but
is
better
better.
baked would be better, I think, yes. Yeah.
So on the select board agenda for the meeting tonight, I don't see anything about.
No,
Harbor
because
Committee.
we, first of all, because a lot of us have been traveling and it's a very full agenda, but I'll have a conversation with Tom and Audra and we'll start working on it. So it won't be on the agenda for tonight.
Elliot?
Okay.
I don't know if the select
Is it?
board is waiting
No,
to,
I was just gonna say, we have at least advertised it in
Yeah.
the regular outlets, but had one person apply.
Yeah.
I'm just waiting for direction from.
Yeah, from,
put it on.
yeah. And I've
I
been out.
don't know if the select board is waiting to have a huge group of applicants or whatever, but I put in an application 3 weeks ago. I haven't heard a word.
You don't want
I have no answer for you, Steve.
I think I would suggest that better baked takes time, and I'd much rather see that in June, we have a mission and some new members than to say at your next meeting, you need to try to fill out the roster.
I mean, the only real pressing issue we have as a harbor committee right now is the approval of Lyman Morris.
Yeah.
And there's nothing really on the agenda coming up that's pressing. So I agree with you. You know, let's,
Okay.
Well, some feedback I got is that the timing of the meetings is such that it's hard for some people to come on a weekday morning at 8 a.m. and dedicate 1 or 2 hours.
What
I
you're
don't
thinking
know.
about is what you're thinking about, what's better.
I don't know, to recruit working people. For example, a fisherman told me, he said, once fishing season starts, I'm gone. I'm not coming to your meeting. And that's unfortunate. He would have been a good member.
I think,
Dustin, do you know the origin of the 8 a.m. meeting?
No.
It was a legacy, yeah. Yeah.
It's just always has been, but it certainly doesn't, it's not required. to be
It's not
in the morning.
required. I mean, you can choose whatever. I mean, it's not whatever, because if we have meetings at 6 p.m., we need to have somebody here to man
Yeah.
Zoom and things like that. So it does have a cost. But we can manage this, but it's more of a schedule to make sure that we have somebody here who can do it.
I think that we can
So,
make that, when we see who's the next group, I think we should realize that we have the flexibility, some flexibility to start them at 4 in the afternoon, which I think is easier than someone who's working, realizing that when they get out of here, they got to go hit an already running train, as opposed to getting out of work a little early to come to a meeting.
So we could consider changing the meeting time.
Yeah.
sure.
Okay, so
I have no problem with
Sophie,
that.
I noted on the select board agenda that select board members are presenting written reports.
So I was not aware of that either. I've been away. It's the first week I see that. I have, Janice, do you
I
know?
think the reason being this time is because of long agendas, but we will go back to normal
Okay.
because we have a budget tonight.
So I will, we have the budget meeting tonight. Okay.
It's just to
So,
save some time.
okay. But I didn't have a chance to write a report. So I will still have a chance to talk about it.
a report about what?
Well, you know how select board members, usually at the beginning of the meeting, we give a brief update of the committees we've attended or the meetings.
Oh, I see.
And for this meeting in particular, we were asked to hand them in writing, but message didn't make it across to Africa, so mine is still in transit. But I'll give a brief update verbally.
So tonight at the meeting, you
Yeah.
will present and share with your select board members the fact that there are empty seats.
Yep.
4 empty seats.
Yep.
And that there needs to be a plan.
Yep.
And for recruitment of members.
And also a better baked plan for the mission and the role of the harbor committee beyond the ordinance.
Yeah.
To make sure that their contribution is valued and that we get people who are interested in contributing, because it's a super important committee for the town.
That
My
sounds
understanding
good.
is that we have some limited mandatory roles,
Yes,
like our
But that-
comments today.
but
And then whatever the select board wants us to do.
I know, and I think we need to give, I think we need to give you a little bit more, to give the harbor committee a little bit more longer runway, maybe. But we may have to have a session here to talk about it and to build it together.
Okay.
Sorry. Can you?
Yeah, who's the proper person or body to clarify the, where members of the harbor committee need to live? Because I think that's a really valid question. whether they need to be Camden residents or
I
not. It
believe
seems like an
it's
easy
stated-
thing to
I
answer.
believe it's stated in the
You have the ordinance.
committee handbook.
Not in the ordinance.
It's not in the ordinance?
The town has an attorney, I believe, right?
Well, no, but Janice handles the staffing
Yeah,
of
I
the
think it's
committees all the
in
time, so.
specifically.
Well, I think we do need
We'll
to
put
find
it-
the written sentence.
Yeah. We'll put it in, if you send me an email and remind me to double check that, I'll do it,
Okay,
if you don't mind. Put it on my to-do list.
all right, very good.
For some committees, you're required to be living in Camden. For others, you're not, and so that's the clarification we need.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and I think
Yeah.
it will determine in a lot of ways the character of the committee.
And I think
Going forward.
there may be a distinction between a board member and a committee member.
Yeah.
Right.
So that ought to be looked into. It's,
So,
Elliot,
yeah,
if you-
sit on some boards where that's the case, you'll bring in an expert
Right.
on a particular topic for a construction committee, for example.
Okay, and how can I get a response to you?
But we'll publish it in the next Harbor Committee meeting. And we'll send it to Josh.
Yeah.
You can send it to Josh.
What is your name?
I'm sorry, my name's Matt Graham. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Lyman Morris.
What was it again?
Matt Graham, Matthew Graham.
Okay, very good. Harbor Master report. No Harbor Master present this morning, so we'll move on to the Harbor Committee comments on Lyman Moore's proposal for additional dock floats. We had a walkthrough for this a few weeks ago, nice rainy morning. And wonder, Bob, do you have any comments?
Want to be sure. We were all three there.
yes.
I was in.
Okay. I'm not sure exactly what our particular focus is meant to be. All I can say is my reaction. Going over, I was thinking, that's a technical term. And then I was surprised how far out it protruded. The one hand down there, it's quite near the official channel. So in terms of any kind of big boats there, they're going to be going through the channel anyway. But before Steamboat Landing was recreated with docks and stuff, I used to have to row my rowboat by there and go up to the head of the harbor. And I know that on hot summer days, I certainly appreciated when it was high tide and I could come in tight, because it's much longer row to go around the outside of that area. And so it just struck me that, well, if that buoy is where the docks end, there is for little boats, just rowboats, kayaks, whatever, it does change the navigation, but whether that's important enough is, I don't know.
So there are procedures for what we're about to do here, okay? And in 108-28 is procedures for permits. So what I would recommend is we go down through that beforehand and just, and then after that, if it meets the procedures properly, then we go to standards and determine whether it meets
So what
the
are
standards.
these are
So-
permits for what?
Procedure for permits. Any construction, renovation, or improvement of a mobile vessel hoist, pier, wharf, bulkhead, breakwater, marine railway, or the other structure shall require an application to the code enforcement officer of the town of Camden. Written application shall include the following information.
One sec, we've just.
It's because no one's coming in on Zoom.
Okay.
That's why.
Okay.
Hopefully, so nobody have heard my comments.
A,
Well, on YouTube, but not on Zoom.
evidence of submission of application for applicable state and federal licensing permits and approvals. Do we have that?
Well, the question is, who are these procedures being followed by? Is this by the planning board or the select board?
This is in the harbor ordinance.
Oh, it is.
Yes.
So my understanding is that there's a there's the planning board is involved and the harbor committee is involved. This
Right.
is why I suggested last time at our last harbor committee that we have a liaison from the harbor committee that works closely with the planning board so that we're aware of all those steps to avoid, a repeat of the situation we had with the Piers ordinance, where we were kind of working in parallel, but not really communicating very
Yeah.
well. So do we,
So who's
so who did we select?
who's presenting this? I mean,
I don't think we have
you, Josh?
a connection.
Well, no, but so was Bruce going to be the liaison and then he resigned? Is this what happened?
I'm not, Josh, were you going?
Bruce was going to be
The liaison, right,
Yeah.
right,
Mhm.
okay.
Well, I'm not sure, again, this is sort of a procedural thing, but I'm not sure whether, my understanding, without ever reading anything or playing lawyer or Google lawyer, was that the planning board has an official voting, granting approval role, and that they were meant to consider information or opinions from us, but that I was not
Well-
aware that we have specific standards that we are the king of.
Well, we do. Code enforcement officers shall review the application for compliance with subsection A1 above and the applicant requirements of chapter 290 zoning. In the event the code enforcement officer determines the application is complete, then the application, together with the related documents, shall be dated and forwarded within 10 business days to the Harbor Committee. The Harbor Committee shall, within 10 business days of the date of receipt, convene a meeting for review of the application. The review and comments of the Harbor Committee shall be in writing, shall specifically address the standards of Article 108-28, which seems to be an error because that refers to a procedure of permits. So I'm guessing that would refer to the standards, which would be 108-24. Wherever that is. Shall state the reasons for the comments and shall be forwarded to the select board for its review and action. Okay, so
So right now, we don't have an application.
Would it
Right.
help for me to
Yes.
present a little bit of a backstory on this?
Well,
Yeah.
How this-
Yeah, we can
how
do
You,
this-
that. Yeah,
you
we
as
can- we
the
can do that.
applicant,
Yeah.
I would like to hear what your thought is about what the Harbor Committee is involved in.
Well, yeah, I don't want to speak for the Harbor Committee, but I do
Oh,
think
I-
it would be helpful to sort of explain as the applicant, sort of how we got here, and some historical precedent, I guess you could say. So again, Joshua Moore, Special Projects Director for Lyman Morse. And Lyman Morse, before I joined the company, proposed this project in I believe it was 2016, and put it forward first to the Harbor Committee, and the Harbor Committee unanimously approved it, then brought it to the Planning Board, and the Planning Board reviewed it and said, they read through the ordinance and they said that they approved it. They said, this looks great to us, but we actually don't think we even need to be involved in this. This is not something that the Planning Board needs to be involved. It needed permission from the Harbor Master, written permission
Josh,
from the
I'm
Harbor
going to
Master.
interrupt just because of time, and what I want to have addressed is what we're doing this morning.
Yep.
Yeah, but I
Yep,
think
I'll get there.
he's leading
I'm
to that.
almost there.
Yeah. And I think
So-
it's useful to have this history. Bob.
So it did require a ordinance amendment that was put in. So you'll see that there is an exemption for the square footage of floats that is in there in the Harbor and Waterways Ordinance that specifically exempts extensions of existing marinas in existence as of June 2017, I think it was.
June 13th, 2017.
So that exemption, so the voters voted on that for this particular project. However, the last step was to have the Army Corps permit to do it. When Lyman Morse went to the Army Corps, they discovered that the float configuration was not in the channel, was not in the Federal Navigation Project, but it was in the setback to the Federal Navigation Project, which I believe is 30 feet. And it intruded into that. So the Army Corps said, nope, we're not going to be able to review this because it's actually in that zone. So project was put on hold at that point, didn't move forward. A lot of things happened, obviously, on that side of the harbor over the last few years. Once the big project in the Inner Harbor was done, we returned and said, okay, let's actually look at this project again. The harbor has been, Federal Navigation Project had been adjusted in 2020, I believe it was, to change the Federal Navigation Project by steamboat landing and in this whole area. That shifted this moment, this line, literally a few feet, and no longer was in this project, would no longer be in the Federal Navigation Project. When we presented this to the planning department, we started with Jeremy Martin. He reviewed it and said, actually, his determination in consultation with Bill Kelly, I believe the town attorney, was that it requires site plan review from the planning board. When they brought it, then he said, going through the checklist, if you will, it requires that site plan review, which has not been submitted yet and it cannot be submitted. One of the pieces of it that it requires is comments from the Harbor Committee. Shall have comments from the Harbor Committee. It's not a permit from the Harbor Committee, comments. And I will be completely honest and say, I have communicated with Jeremy and said, what form do those comments need to take? Are there criteria that should be looked at? And he said, no, we just need comments. We just need to know what the Harbor Committee thinks of the project, see what they have.
See, I don't agree with that.
But
Because the ordinance specifically states procedures,
For
okay,
permits.
for permits.
This isn't a permit from the Harbor Committee. This is a planning
It's
board
a-
site plan review
It's a permit from the planning board.
from the planning board.
So it's still a permit. I mean,
But we're not the permitting body. We're not issuing the Harbor Committee is not
Staging, yeah.
issuing a permit. We're,
elephant swallowed my glasses. We're in the car.
trust me, you don't want to be me right now. You have,
You do have something.
so,
I can't read.
and you see in
They're
the
not reading
procedure
glasses.
there, it's specific on what documents are required for us to review. I mean, it's clear.
But right now, we don't have this application, right?
We've tried to submit this application a few times and they will not accept it until it has the Harbor Committee
Who-
comments.
who
Planning
wants it?
board,
Planning board,
Planning
okay.
planning board.
Right.
Okay. So the Harbor Committee needs
I'm not
to,
sure if I could
But
yeah, go ahead.
now play Google lawyer. What this is talking about for permits is vessel hoist, pier, wharf, bulkhead, breakwater, marine railway, other structure. And my understanding is that these are seasonal floats.
Correct.
They will come out in January. They'll be
But
out of
they're
there in
structured.
January.
They are not structures, they're floats, seasonal floats. That is the difference.
And that
um,
the comments version of our role comes from a planning board statute or ordinance about how they review whatever their mission is.
My understanding is that is at least the planning department's interpretation of that. That's the guidance that we have been given as the applicants. Because we've asked several times, how we can put this forward, just so we can kind of get an answer, because we need to order the floats and all that. We're hoping to get them in for this summer. Not sure that's going to be possible at this point. And so we said, what can we do? And they said, we literally can't do anything until you cannot submit they won't accept the application
Without the comments.
without the comments.
Okay.
That's the
And
piece.
do we know what the planning board's standards are?
That's all in the ordinance, the zoning ordinance for
yeah,
site
but
plan
that's-
review. Mark,
that-
what's that?
The planning board is different, all right? We have standards in the harbor ordinance. And that's where it's important for us to continue to review the harbor ordinance, so we understand what it says. And they're spelled out here in the application with Gartley and Dorsey's what would you, semi-application?
I think there's a memo.
Memo. Okay, that spells it out. But, and here's my concern, maybe you can help me with this, Josh. it says, commercial marinas established, oh, established before June 13th. Okay.
Extensions of commercial marinas.
Yeah. No, extension of existing dock systems for commercial marinas established on or before June 13th, 2017. Okay. Up at the top, it says permit activity, floats permitted by Maine DEP, April 17th, 2019. So to me, that tells me that it's not exempt.
I missed you on the last part. That why would it be
No,
not
no.
exempt?
Because it's exempt if it was established before June 2017.
The marine.
Okay.
Marinas established before.
Established.
It's
No.
the
Not the-
extensions of existing marinas.
It's the establishment
The
of the marina,
marinas.
right? I don't have the
That-
text.
That is-
Extensions of existing dock systems for commercial marinas established on or before June 13th, 2017.
That's the
The
commercial marinas
marina.
established before June 13th.
Says
I'd say
extensions.
Grammatically,
It's
it's extensions.
It says extensions. Let's give it to the lawyer. Right there.
X.
Not disbarred, but.
To,
But working,
that,
working on it,
But,
but working on
Left
it.
under a cloud.
and to that, Mark, I would say,
No clouds, just plain.
you would want to go back to the warrant actually that was done in June 17th, June 2017 to pass it because it actually explained specifically what this was for. So whether the grammatical structuring of that sentence is right, the explanation that voters had before when they voted on it was very clear what it was.
Maybe so, but this is the ordinance, all right? We have professionals that have created this ordinance and interpreted it and put it on paper for us to review.
Yep.
So, it's,
Seems like you're going to need to get a legal understanding of that because I think that's a.
I mean, it is what
It's a
it-
valid
it
point.
says
It's
what
a-
it
yeah.
says. I mean, that's.
But it could also, if you read it one way, it says what it says. If you read it another way, where the
I'll let you read it.
extensions of commercial marinas established, or is it extensions of commercial marinas?
No, it's extensions of docks for
For commercial
commercial
marinas.
marinas. That's what it says, extension of docks.
For commercial marinas established.
Marinas.
So is it qualifying the commercial marinas?
No.
Or is it qualifying
qualified
the
for
extension?
docks.
So
That's
okay, sorry. I think
Go ahead, Sophie.
I was going to say we're a little bit behind here. For
What
the
are we-
sake of time.
Sorry, Sophie, I want
Yeah.
to interject. What are we behind on?
Oh, no, I mean, I'm looking at the clock and I'm trying to figure out, so what do we need to do? What are the steps? This is why we needed somebody to be working with the planning board to make sure that we understand the guidelines correctly.
No, but we're waiting on Bob's interpretation.
So Bob,
I can't from that. What I would say is that what you first forget, when things are quoted for this reason and we're reading them for that reason, I'm a little hesitant to just take it out of context. When you're looking at the ordinance about us, I think that is about, they were pushing they were going to extend, the things we walked on that the travel lift drives on. If they were going to push that out another 15 feet, that would apply because that's specific to what is a permit that we're related to. I don't think that seasonal docks are something that the Harbor Committee is giving a permit for. I think that it's pretty clear that everyone thinks that at the very least, the planning board is meant to get comments from us. And then I think that we would be looking at their standards to see which of their standards actually relate to the harbor as opposed to, and it wouldn't be for this, but for something else, it might be the attachment to the land or the upland, et cetera. So what is it that we're actually meant to opine about?
But these are the standards for floats and ramps. These are the standards.
Based on what?
based on the harbor ordinance. It's,
The harbor ordinance that you read did not say floats, talked about bulkheads, et cetera.
no, that was in the procedures, all right? Now what we're looking at is, this is under a whole nother section. It's 108-30, floats and ramps, okay? And that's broken down for inner harbor, outer harbor, and coastal harbor, all right? So outer harbor and coastal is what Gartley and Dorsey outlines in this memo. And these are all the standards, and these are all their responses to those standards. So
Well,
that's what we have to review.
But you have to comment, right? The harbor committee is not issuing a permit.
Correct.
So you have to comment on what Gartley and Dorsey submitted,
Okay.
and
So,
based on your,
so one comment, our first comment is,
I mean, the issue is that I don't want you guys to go down an avenue that is not what is required for the permitting
Yeah.
process to get to the finish line. So,
Okay.
I mean, I think we
So-
should get your comments today.
Please.
And let's double check also with the planning board and Jeremy that these are the steps that are required to move this permitting process forward. Is it?
so
The
number
issue
one
is-
comment I would like to make is under 108-30 floats and ramps. There is a discrepancy between Article 4, the meaning of Article 4 pertaining to the permitted, the floats permitted by Maine DEP on April 17th, 2019. The discrepancy is, it's unclear whether the extension of these docks is exempt or not. Okay, that's our comment for that. Let the planning board determine that.
I have to,
I'm not even sure the planning board can.
if we can peel back further, honestly, and this is my reaction to various things related to Lyman Morrison, with also related to this committee in general. It always seems like it's, when we took this up at the last meeting, we were like getting it.
We didn't even have
The
a
night-
copy of this.
We didn't have that. We were getting it like the night before, and then we were going over to the walkthrough, and then we're coming back here with the obvious, let's put it bluntly, chaos of now we've got just 3 members. And I would have liked this process to start with, whether it's Jeremy or a memo
And-
from someone in the town saying, here is what, something you need to do, and here is the process for doing it. We need your comments on these standards to the planning board. Or that, as Mark's saying, you got a whole other thing going on, but I don't think we want to be deciding. Mark's
But I'd
questions
also
for
like
him.
to note that we are reviewing this application without anybody from the planning department and without the harbor master present.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay, those are 2 very important issues, I think.
I don't disagree, but
Sophie, what do you think our assignment is?
I have no idea. And I mean, I'm kind of remembering the conversation we had last month about this, and I thought I asked for a memo that outlined the different steps. Maybe I didn't.
Shenley produced
So Shenley produced a memo that
a
outlines.
pair of memos here.
Okay, so have you guys looked at these?
I'm not sure, but when did,
Okay, so that's exactly what I requested, so that we knew what everybody's role and was in this process.
Right, and what Shenley was citing was
Have you
code
seen a copy of this too?
sections. Shenley's memos, March 18th, and March 26th. Mark, you at one time were a member of the planning board,
I was,
not currently.
correct.
are you willing to take on the responsibility to represent the Harbor Committee with, in its engagement with the planning board? Are you willing to do that?
Yes.
How do you
Very
spell
good.
Shenley?
Hmm?
If I'm trying to find this email.
Shenley Neely, Neely.
Copy, I'll go make
Josh,
copies.
do you remember how those were circulated?
I'll make copies. I'll go make copies. That's where we should be starting.
Mark, you've cited what you feel are discrepancies in the ordinance.
Mhm.
What
Well, no, not discrepancies in the ordinance, discrepancies in the application.
I thought the application hadn't been submitted yet.
Well, the memo. Not so, thanks.
I can assure you, gentlemen, if you're confused, Lyman Morse is equally confused.
Yeah,
if not
right,
more so,
right.
As the applicant.
Can I ask a question, timing wise? Josh, you mentioned, you weren't sure this was gonna get to the water this year. And if that's the case, I feel like we should be unwinding this and starting so that at the next meeting, someone is told, we've already done our site, been out there and looked at it. And that we could come back with someone saying, here is what you're meant to opine about, and here are the standards that are applicable, and this is what the town attorney or town manager, or town whatever has directed. Does that completely screw you up?
A little, yes. We are pushing very hard still to get these in the water this summer. That is still very much the goal.
Mhm.
Originally we were looking at, can we get these in by Memorial Day, start of summer? That's
But-
not going to happen.
By when?
Memorial Day, that was our, original goal. That's not going to happen. So now we're sort of pushing it back, saying, okay, but if we can get them in by, middle of June, end of June, then we can still seize the summer, and that will certainly help our operations significantly.
Does this require a town vote?
No. This requires, our understanding is that this requires a vote of the planning board via the site plan review process. That is the approval process that is required for these floats to be implemented. And as part of that, we have been told that the planning board needs comments from the harbor committee related to these floats.
Josh, if I may, that interpretation is different from what we were told in 2016, which was
Yes.
the planning board in it. So the interpretation has
Has
changed
changed.
in this second round.
Thank you, Sophie. Josh, do you have any
This is a
knowledge of the planning board status within their process?
My understanding is they are waiting, I'm quite sure they are waiting for these comments. This is the piece that remains. So, after that site plan review, site walk, I did ask what the next step was. And he said, once we receive the comments from the harbor committee, then the application will be complete, all the elements will be there. And then we can actually formally start the site plan review process, application process.
And the comments of the harbor committee can be on the site review that they've done, the walkthrough or the application or anything, right? Because you said there's no specific criteria that the harbor committee has to fill. Okay.
But there
That's what I was
is.
told from Jeremy Mark.
But that's where we have a disagreement between Mark and Jeremy. Okay. So we need to clarify that.
I mean, I don't understand what's to clarify, okay? There are standards for floats. There are standards for that in the harbor ordinance for us to review. It's right here in black and white, floats and ramps, standards. So if our planner tells us they don't exist, they do exist. And Gartley and Dorsey has outlined the standards. All right, it says right here, ordinance standards.
I think
And-
we have potentially two things here. Try to play lawyer for a minute. There is apparently a process with the planning board where they need comments from us to move forward on their process.
Right.
And this memo from staff basically says, you ever see Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid before the knife fight? There are no rules for a knife fight. You know what happens next. So at this point, staff is telling us you can make comments on some undefined mission. I would say that first, we would want to be looking at, well, what are the standards they're applying so we can articulate comments that are relevant to their thought process. The second thing is, if there is a second thing that actually requires some sort of permit from the Harbor Committee, that would be a separate and distinct process. And if that exists and people haven't identified it, and then Mark raising it now leads someone to ask Bill Kelly, is this something that requires a permit? Then that can come back on a separate day. I don't think applying standards at this meeting applicable to that when we haven't got anyone saying that that's applicable.
Let me read this one more time. The review and comments of the Harbor Committee shall be in writing, shall specifically address the standards in Article 6, Section 108-24, which is confusing because that number's wrong.
Well, that's where we need an opinion from someone else as to if that's correct or whether we don't understand it.
Because the standards are actually 108. I'm not going to say because I don't want to be wrong also.
So the ordinance needs to be changed, right? Number one.
Yes.
Okay, so
Mark, do you feel that a discussion with Jeremy would be appropriate to try and interpret what we're seeing in the ordinance?
Absolutely. I mean,
So,
so in
Mark,
the
you're-
interest of
you're-
time, could you have a conversation with Jeremy and report back via email to the group, maybe? Because I mean, I would hate to have to wait until the meeting in May.
yep.
No.
You
Well, I
I think we need to-
understand. So
Okay.
I think to move this forward,
Yes,
why don't we they want our comments.
right.
So in our comments, why don't we just address this and say, according to Section 108-28, Procedures and Permits, Paragraph 3 requires the Harbor Committee address the standards in Article 6, 108-28. This is
Wrong.
What was that site that you just said?
Article 6, Section 108-28.
And that's the site that you say is erroneous?
Erroneous does not,
Exist.
does not
Is irrelevant.
relate
It's-
to the standards.
Yeah.
What relates to the standards is -24.
Okay.
108, no, it's 108-30.
Sorry, -30.
So you think that's the intent of
B,
that statement?
yes.
So, and the second clarification we need, so for the planning board purpose, these are the comments of the Harbor Committee. So number one, the issue you mentioned.
Yes.
Okay.
So, and number 2 was the dates.
Whether it's exempt or not, and whether
Yes.
it's the marina or the floats. So we need, but
Is someone
Yes, they-
arguing that it's exempt?
Lyman
Yes.
Morris is arguing it's exempt because the June 2017 statutes pertains to the marina, not the float.
But exempt
No.
from what?
No, it,
Right.
Exempt to exempt from
square
square footage
footage
limitations.
limitations.
And I think we may even need to look into that because I believe that it is,
Because you're
B1?
exceeding the square.
I don't think
footage.
we are exceeding the
You're-
square footage.
okay.
So I think it may be irrelevant.
It
in
may
that
be
case.
irrelevant, okay.
I think we could actually.
But we need clarification whether the exemption attaches to the marina or to the floats.
But if the exemption is irrelevant, then I guess maybe it isn't.
Yeah, but
Um,
it would, clarification would be useful so we can have the correct grammar, actually.
And the other question I would have is if, I haven't looked at what these standards in 30 are, if we made comments that said this project stinks, is that just an opinion or is that an action?
So I think that's the most important point is that but I think it pertains to the standards, right? Mark's going to say.
I'm sorry. One more time.
So
The
Bob is
question-
asking
My
what-
question is, if we look at the standards of this 30 instead of 28, and if we express a comment to the planning board, we think it stinks, is that just an opinion? And then they carry on from there under their ordinance? Or is that an action by us that would prevent the project from going forward, which is a whole different world to be working in?
So basically, is it a comment that Lehman Morris can address, or is it a kill switch?
Is it,
right?
is it an
Well,
opinion?
It's an opinion, yeah.
That is, I mean, the date is extremely important, all right? Because in the outer harbor, floats shall not exceed 240 square feet in area and no dimension shall exceed 30 feet. In the coastal harbor, the float shall not exceed 360 square feet in area and no dimension shall exceed 30 feet. So is that overall or is that per float?
Per float.
Per float.
Per float. That's the way that's been
Because
interpreted.
you meet those guidelines.
I think that's the thing is, I
But-
believe now that we do that, I believe that we actually meet all these guidelines. So, to the foot, it looks like.
Yeah.
I think I think the exemption issue, because the exemption, my reading of that is, because it says extensions of commercial marinas, blah, 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 are exempt from sections, blah, 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 and that's the square footage. We're actually underneath that. So you know what I mean? We don't exceed that limitation. Is that making any sense?
Yeah, it does, per float,
Per float,
per float. So,
the 30 in any one dimension, yeah.
yeah. And,
But overall, it's still only 240.
well, commercial marines and exempt in B2. Garley and Dorsey is referring to that as falling under the exemption.
Okay.
So everything here really hinges on that exemption.
Mhm.
So are we in agreement? I mean, that's part of our comment. We
Yeah,
We
that should
want
be
the-
clarified.
Clarification
we
on
want the planning board to clarify the exemption based on the permitted date of 2019, whether it's actually exempt under the 2017.
So our comment is really a question,
Yes.
whether the exemption is necessary, whether,
Whether this
Oh.
falls under the exemption.
well, but isn't there also a question that Josh is saying, well, we don't really need the exemption because
Because we're within, they're within, so that's part of Lyman Morris. sorry.
Sophie, where can we see the June 2017 warrant?
It's in the town report, the annual report. I have a copy of it for 2017.
It's in that report?
Yep.
what's
Okay.
this, what would that be
That's what the voters voted on,
related to?
this exact exemption, which gives the specifics of what they were voting on. That would be, get to the
Stephen.
grammatical question, grammatical answer.
Okay. Stephen Gold, you have something to share?
Yes.
Microphone. please.
Thank you. I'd like to preface my remarks by saying that I really like Lyman Morris. They've worked on my boats at both yards. I buy all my fuel from them, et cetera. But I'm really against this proposal. I feel that, for one thing, the Outer Harbor is a public resource. And to give up part of our public resource to a for-profit company is a mistake. It'd be like selling Shirt Tail Point to a motel. The other thing is, I notice on this plan, it doesn't even show the harbor line. And I believe that this plan far exceeds what's a permissible distance for a pier. We've just gone through an extensive process trying to either eliminate piers in the Outer Harbor or greatly reduce them, including such aesthetic factors as the view from the state park. I think for practical purposes, there are other negatives to this program. One thing that's not even being considered is that, at least in my memory, Lyman Morris continued a program of selling dinghy space that included parking and I think maybe even use of showers. So if part of this is going to be to extend a dinghy facility, 25, 30, 40 more dinghies, whatever, why are we not addressing parking? Where are those people going to park? Lyman Morris has mentioned that this dockage can be used for transient dockage and maybe even permanent dockage. My feeling is that it's not a great site for that. People who are experienced with the harbor know that most afternoons the wind picks up, and especially in August, what in the Windjammer Trader we used to call the get-home wind, that's not going to be a great safe place to have larger boats tied up, larger meaning anything over 30 feet. And aesthetically, if that's used for transient dockage, it changes the whole appearance of the Outer Harbor. So my feeling is, if the purpose is just to extend dinghy dockage, perhaps permit one float. I also think that this exemption about 30 feet, if you string 4 30-foot floats together, you're playing with the exemption idea. And especially if they're strung together, it would be like, our own facility on the other side of the harbor there, where they'd be physically strapped together, bolted together. And that to me makes it one float. I think I had one other point that I wanted to make about this. I don't think it's a great idea. I think that we have to leave the Outer Harbor it is. And I also find that this discussion today, it's almost as if there's an assumption that this is their right to do this. And that doesn't seem right to me. Because if it's their right to design something like this, to shoot way out into the harbor, why isn't it their right to put an L on that and go another 150 feet to the left? That in just examining standards, somewhere we have to apply the aesthetic ideals of what we want for our harbor. Thank you.
Stephen, you were a member of the Harbor Committee in 2017 and in the months and year prior to the June 2017 warrant.
Is that a question or was that a
Yes,
statement?
You were a member, is that right?
I don't remember the exact years that I was a member, but in this issue, I could say that it was in 2018 that I lost my memory.
I think that what he's alluding to is, were you involved in this application?
Yes, that's correct.
Originally?
I don't believe so. I'd have to go back and
You
look.
don't
This is
recall
totally unfamiliar to me.
Harbor Committee discussions relating to the June warrant 2017.
It could be that was when and it might have been over this, that the select board arbitrarily dissolved the Harbor
That
Committee.
was in 2019, I believe. I followed that.
Well, if that was in 2019, then I probably was a member, because I think I was a member for at least 5 years.
Well, that's when Floats permitted by Maine DEP, April 17th, 2019.
But it's always been stated that in applications like this, people often go to get those permits first. So they can say, well, here we are and we have these permits, okay? But those permits don't mean that you automatically get our permit. And in fact, it was stated at other meetings that those permits are often not looked at extensively.
Okay. Thank you for your comments,
You're welcome.
Stephen Gold. Mark, are you willing to write up your 2 comments? Prepare a written statement on the comments,
Sure.
okay? And you have agreed to be the Harbor Committee liaison with the planning board. And who
Boy, you are
would
really
be the
nailing
primary
it.
contact at the planning board with regard to this issue?
Oh, it's Jeremy.
Well, that's not the planning board.
He's not the planning
All
board.
right.
He's the, I mean, I would start with Jeremy and I would reach out to probably Chriso as well. On the planning board.
The chairman of the planning board is,
Ethan.
Ethan, yeah.
So Ethan.
Yeah, but maybe we want to have a joint session with them as well, you know,
Well, I think that
because
I-
because we're going to end up in the same, I'm worried that you're going to be doing some work, that the process isn't clear between the Harbor Committee and the planning board, and that you're,
Well, I
so we really need clarification right now on the steps. I need to read this memo. We all need to read those 2 memos that Shanley has shared, and maybe, and make sure that we understand what the steps are. And you need to write those comments and share. I mean, sharing those comments is fine. I don't think it's not going to preclude anything else in the process, I think.
So I think that's, what we want to do is just generate our comments so that we can move this forward. You know, so what else do we have for comments?
well,
Um,
we're circling,
We have,
I was gonna say the train.
Not to
We're circling the train, but we really
Yeah.
are circling the issue, which is what do we actually think?
Yeah.
And are there, even if we go with subsection 30, what comments, because Mark's comments go to sort of procedural questions, and we may find, no, you don't need to worry about those things according to the town attorney, we're cool. Or we may find, no, actually, now that we thought about that, there's a whole process to do also. But if it's the first that you don't need to worry about that, we still should be issuing comments on the substance.
Yeah.
That we haven't
Right,
talked about,
right.
other than my first statement. We haven't talked about, and I don't know if we have the section 30 standards
so
or exactly what it is we would opine.
okay, Bob, do you have comments? Based
My
on
first
your
comment
site
is
walkthrough?
that
What is-
Based on the walkthrough, I felt like it was surprised me how far out it went and how much it potentially, I was thinking mostly about navigation. But Steve Gold's point, which is true of all the discussion about piers, et cetera, is what do you want the harbor to, the aesthetic of the harbor to be? And the aesthetic as you come into the harbor, if you have a dock system going out there almost to the channel, and then once you start putting some significant boats there, does the outer harbor see into the harbor the way you do now? These are concerns I would have.
All right,
But I
you
don't
willing
know if
to,
there's a standard that someone's going to apply that those are relevant, that my thoughts are relevant to.
how about if you present your thoughts and your opinions to the other members of the committee in writing? All of us,
The other member of what committee?
this committee right here. Very small
I
group.
don't think that we run meetings by,
yeah, I think he just did.
I think I've just shared my thoughts and I'd be interested to know what you
Okay.
two thought.
All right,
So I'll just add that into the comments.
okay.
Add Steve's into the comments and
Well, Steve is the public, so.
I know, public
Okay.
comment. I just-
Well, but I think that at some point, there's, because it sort of goes back to Jeremy telling us that we could file comments as members of the public with the planning board, and I don't think that's what this committee
No,
is, just a group of individuals. The
No.
question is, do we have a consensus of concerns or lack of concerns? So
Okay,
I think I would suggest that we talk about what we thought based on the review.
okay. I have my own personal observations based on the site walkthrough, and I think that the dock extension would, in its form, resemble a pier. It is a long thing sticking out into the water. And we've had much discussion about piers going out into the outer harbor. But in essence, in its shape and size, it resembles a pier sticking out there. I think that it is proximate to the navigation area out there. It's, by my estimation, it's about 41 feet from the federal authorized water. There will be traffic. That's going to increase traffic around in that area there.
so is that fair to say you feel it's creates questionable navigation in that area?
Yes, it increased traffic. Navigation. And I have a question that I don't know and anyone can answer. And what is the benefit to the community of having a dock extension out there? Is
I
it,
don't know if that's
Well,
something
that, yeah,
that the Harbor Committee would be, or the planning board, honestly. I'm not sure if that's a factor. If Lyman Morse says, we're gonna have a whole lot of jobs because of this, I'm not sure that that's relevant to the
yeah,
standards of the
that's,
planning board.
that's like saying, if you're gonna build a garage on your house, what's the benefit to the community? It's, if you're gonna expand your business, what's the benefit to the community? It's not. I agree, I don't think it's.
well, it is a public resource. Is it not?
The
The harbor?
Yes,
That's
I
a point.
absolutely agree.
That's a
Okay,
point.
and so there's Stephen Gold commented, it's private use of a public resource. So what's the community getting out of that? And you can talk about jobs and so forth and supporting the working waterfront, and those are valid points.
Do you want me to comment on that?
Or what's the public access or?
Why don't you wait and hear it all the time?
Yes, Matt, I'd like your comment.
Yeah, I mean,
Please.
in Lyman Morse's, view, obviously any change has positives and negatives, especially for a public resource like the harbor. But there is even an argument that this is going to improve navigation in one sense that's very relevant from a safety factor, which is that our current operation involves launching 100 boats a year from the travel lift pit. We test run them in the pit, and then they leave the pit and go out into the channel and make the turn into the inner harbor. You guys are boaters. You all know that sometimes things happen. Things especially happen when boats have been sitting
Mhm.
on the hard for the whole winter. So one of our hopes is that we can use that dock as a staging area without having to move boats and occasionally hip tow them around to the other docks. The other public benefit is that it would provide people with another docking option for access to all the onshore facilities that Lyman Morse has developed and the businesses that are on the wharf. So
But what's the public access? I mean, do you have to be a client of Lyman Morris to use the docks? Do you have to?
you would pay Lyman
You would
Morse the
pay
same
Lyman
as the
Morse.
other docks that we
Okay.
have.
So,
Yes.
so I think that's probably, and I'm sorry, I cannot comment because I'm just a liaison. But I would encourage the Harbor Committee to ask the public access question
Yeah.
and whether
I
we
mean,
can
it is-
work with
I think it
Lyman
is
Morris
relevant to note that-
to increase public access and make
Yeah.
sure, guarantee public access. I
That
think- I
Lyman
think
Morse has always allowed the public to, walk around our facilities and enjoy them. I mean, people walk down the wharf all the time and our docks as well. So.
Okay.
But as far as coming in for, say, a couple hours for a restaurant stay,
Do you know what our current policy is on that?
We don't, I mean,
It's more
Hit or
handled,
miss
it's
if
more
there's
handled on an
space.
ad hoc
Yeah.
basis if there's
Yeah.
space. Yeah, obviously Lyman Morse has an ownership interest in one of the restaurants, so we want that entire area to succeed. But we could put a policy in place for that.
I mean,
It's not a free dock. I do want to make clear that it is,
no, but I think these are the discussions maybe that the Harbor Committee should have with Lyman Morris in public access, in maybe looking at adding dinghy space or sharing, we have a real issue in the harbor with dinghy space. So I'm just suggesting the Harbor Committee has those conversations with you guys, because I think the community will ask whether those conversations have taken place on public access, on dinghy permitting or kayaking, whatever. Let's put it all out in the open now while we're in this permitting process and this, before we go too far down the road and those questions have not been at least examined.
Yeah, and
That's-
we
that's
would
a
really
suggestion.
value and appreciate those kinds of conversations. This process has been fairly confusing for us, and you've seen the reports. I mean,
All around.
none of this stuff is free. We're throwing a lot of resources at this. So yeah, we would appreciate that.
So one of our comments is the benefits. Benefits would include dinghy space, additional dinghy space, and public access.
I think you need to have a conversation with Lyman Morris or organize this so that the Harbor Committee and Lyman Morris and maybe the planning board may have a conversation about those options. I don't think a 2-minute
And
bullet point is enough. I'm sorry.
Well,
but because
it's
it
your
really-
guys' comments,
Okay,
but in my
so-
opinion, another significant benefit is having dockage by the only haul out facility in the harbor that eliminates the need to bring boats around that turn. I mean, we had a boat last year that ran aground, sinking, and just maneuvering all that and not being able to get mechanics on boats by the spot where they're hauled in and out of the water is a big issue. Not just for us, but for the
For everyone,
public,
yeah, for
although
the public,
obviously it's
so,
Lyman Morris's
so is this a fair statement? Benefits, because all we're doing is providing comments
But,
to the select board and the planning board.
right, but the comment
So-
could be,
So what I'm saying here is benefits include additional dinghy space and public access, and should be further explored.
I don't agree with that. I'm not.
okay.
I'll step back. That's my take on it.
Thank you. No, but I'm trying to put everything in
No,
the
it's
open because we've had so many issues where, we don't discuss those things openly and then they come back and say, well, how come we didn't discuss this? So I'm trying to be a little bit proactive here in a very confusing process. Bob, sorry, I
That's
interrupted
what-
you.
What I'm saying is, in terms of us making a group comment, that this provides public access and this provides dinghy storage, it was made clear at the last meeting that there might be some additional dinghy permits that will be attached to this, but that they're going to use it for however they can use it and to maximize its use.
Yeah.
And that the public access, when the public access costs money, that's not the same as public access at Steamboat Landing or the public landing. It's commercial use. So I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm just definitely not saying that the Harbor Committee is saying, yay, this increases public access, because it's not.
But I think the Harbor Committee could say, how can this increase the public? You can ask a question in the comments and leading to a conversation with Lyman Morris, the planning board. I think one of your comments could be the concern for public access, the concern that additional dockage could, how can we work with Lyman Morris so that it increases permitting for dinghy, things like that. I think we need to be a bit creative because we don't have a very strict process here, that to make sure that the questions that the public may ask of this project are asked through the Harbor
but-
Committee.
Again, and
I know.
I feel like the process has gotten off on the wrong
I
foot.
know.
There should be an application somewhere that is there, that they are advocating for and that the planning board is working on. And I'm still asking in section 30, what are the standards that if we're right that they just got the wrong one, kind of factors does section 30 look at?
So maybe
Okay, well,
It's-
that's something that all of us need to look at.
This is section 30, okay? That's Gartland Dorsey's response to it all.
And I don't personally see this as a public access facility. I don't interpret it that way. It's for Lyman Morse to use for their
Yep.
business. And
So,
if they want to tie dinghies there or tie boats, whatever, that's for them to decide. If they want to allow people to tie up there to patronize one of the businesses on the boardwalk there, well, that's their decision. But
so as far as our comments go, it's questionable it creates questionable navigation in the area. As I stated, though, however, it also may provide safety issues. It's private use of public resource, and that it's clearly a for-profit project. However, the benefits could include additional dinghy space, public access, and which should be further explored.
And what's the dinghy access?
Well, I mean, the backside is shallow water, so they've said they intend to use that as dinghy space, but
That would be
it's-
private dinghy.
the point is, it's not our responsibility or our requirement to advise them and say, well, we'll approve this if you do this or that, okay? It's our responsibility to provide input to the planning board saying, this is what we feel. I mean, if you require the backside of the dock to just consist of dinghies, then, that could be part of the application. That could be part of the requirement for approval by the planning board. But
And in that particular aspect, what's the significance of that? Just dinghies on the backside? What's the
well,
meaning?
we've got a shortage of dinghy space in
But
the
it's
harbor.
private dinghy.
It's still a dinghy.
Not everyone who owns a Lyman Morse dinghy permit is on a Lyman Morse mooring,
Right.
nor are they all, some people just buy the dinghy permits and store
Right.
a dinghy there.
Yeah,
So
I-
it does benefit Camden Harbor
I've
more.
explored that myself, is buying a Lyman Morse. But again, that's a private dinghy space.
Yeah.
As opposed to a public
So
over
it's still
on
dinghy
Steamboat
space.
Landing. Yes, it is
So if
dinghy
we're
space.
overcrowded here and people
Okay,
want to
all
like
right, good.
put a dinghy over there,
I
it's,
agree. More dinghy space is a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Guess whether it's public or private. Thank you for talking that through with me, so to
Yep.
enlighten me on that. Okay, very good.
Well,
so,
I'm sorry, I have to go.
Yeah. I
Okay,
think, I mean-
Sophie, we'll look forward to hearing your comments about Harbor Committee appointments at the meeting tonight.
Yeah, and whatever you need to double check or to direct to any department to send me an email, I'll get them, just put them like, okay, I'll do it.
Mhm.
I'm sorry, I just had the whole week.
Okay, very good. There is one thing I would like to share with you. At our next meeting on May 14th, Island Institute is going to visit us and give us a presentation on electrification of boat propulsion.
Oh, very cool.
And also they may touch on the subject of resiliency
Excellent.
because they are, of course, very involved in those discussions.
Do we have a time for this? Is that
Well, the time for them to do their presentation is going to be 8:30 a.m. So we're going to try and finish some of our standard business prior to that so that the bulk of the meeting, and we're not trying to rush them and cut them off. This is that's a very high profile organization here in Mid-Coast or in Maine. And we're privileged to get them
Agreed.
To come,
I'll,
so-
I'll share that on the select board as well. Make sure that
Yes,
we publicize the information.
if you would,
Yep.
I would appreciate publicizing it. I think the community should be aware of it.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much, Harbor Committee, for your hard work. Thank you. And I apologize again for leaving you in the middle, but I really have to go.
Mhm.
All right, so way it stands now, I'll draft up what I feel our comments are, and I'll send it to both of you to review and edit. And
Okay.
We'll work it out so that it's a collaboration of
Uh-huh.
everything that was said here.
And what do you feel is an appropriate timeline for us to accomplish that? And that puts it on you.
Probably Christmas.
Okay, and that's it.
How about this week?
Yeah, I'll have to do it this week. I'm out of town Saturday, Sunday.
Uh-huh, okay. All right, I look forward to your
So
draft.
it'll be this week.
And we'll both respond promptly to that.
Yeah.
And you say that you're going to be out.
I'll be gone for a week.
You'll be gone next week.
Yeah.
So that could inhibit your availability to communicate with the planning board.
Well, what I do is I just,
Just send our comments.
once we get our comments all formulated and
Mhm.
final edit, then I'll just forward that to Ethan,
Uh-huh, okay,
Ethan and Jeremy.
uh-huh, okay, sounds great. Sounds good, very good.
And, yeah, I mean, in an attempt to, try to move this forward for these guys. I mean,
Okay, so that'll wrap up our discussion of the Lyman North Dock Extension
Yeah.
project for today. Review the status of peer moratorium initiatives. Can someone update me on where that is at?
Nope.
Next item.
Uh-huh, okay. Anybody in the public have any comments about that? No, okay, very good. We have the Harbor, excuse me, Harbor Committee's role in the town climate resiliency and planning.
I think that's part of the conversation we just had with Sophie. That I personally don't want to, I want to spend time on that issue, but I don't want to spend time on that issue and have the result we've
Yeah.
had recently of nobody cares.
Yeah.
So if they ask us to start coordinating stuff, and I think we need that to really go into a thought process on that, we need 2 or 3 new members who are going to be going forward with us on that project.
Yeah.
So we need a little bit of blessing and a little bit of additional input from the people that are going to be part of it.
Well, right, I think we need to understand what others are doing, what Jeremy's involved in, what the planning board is involved in. There are civic groups such as Camden Can looking at that. And we need to, I think, have everyone working together, moving in the same direction. So that,
Well, we need that, but we also need conversations, kind of like we were having this morning, where we're not a bunch of bobblehead dolls. That there are people saying, what do you mean by that? Or we should, different opinions coming in to be discussed and then synthesized.
Okay.
Yes, I need to step out, but thank you for your attention.
Okay,
Yeah.
Matt,
Great.
thank you
Nice
for
to meet
sharing
you.
today. Okay, as you heard the discussion with Sophie about Island Institute on the 14th. Do you expect to be there, Mark? May 14th, our meeting?
So that's going to be our next meeting. Yes.
And you, Bob?
Oops. I think so.
Because if you're not there, one of us isn't there, the way things
Right.
are
And
today,
when I get
there's
home,
no meeting.
I will
Well,
lift my paper
yeah.
calendar because I'm so old, and I'll look into May and see if I have a problem, but I doubt I do.
We don't, I mean,
Okay.
we don't, there's no reason for a quorum at that meeting.
Well, there's a little bit of a reason of a quorum to get people to come to a conversation without enough people. It's better to have a conversation when you do have enough people.
Oh, yeah, yeah, I agree.
Right, okay. Well, please hold that date aside if you can. And then depending on how things are shaping up with our other agenda items, we may want to convene a half an hour earlier to get things out of the way, because the Island Institute will start at 8:30 and they will have the remainder of our time.
And what else will we have on the agenda?
Well, I would suggest that there be some sort of publicity or something in the paper or whatever, because I think it's a waste of their time to just come to talk to the three of us.
Okay, I get that point. I have made efforts to publicize the event, talking to people and trying to generate interest from other communities even. So hopefully we'll have a public contingent here. Josh, thanks for coming.
Thank you.
And thanks for letting us know.
So, so with that in mind, I mean, why do it in a harbor committee meeting, and why not set up a public talk at the library one evening?
Well, I approached the yacht club on this topic
Yeah? Or the yacht club?
and I was unable to get a slot for 2024. I've talked to them about 2025. But I did not approach the library. And that is a good point, to make it a community-wide presentation.
Right.
Um,
And I think to the expanded topic of it's not just about electric boats, but the resiliency thing is what's really going to draw people and becomes part of the conversation that we want to have through the harbor committee of how do we respond to what's going on.
Well, I talked to the Island Institute about resiliency because it came up on our agenda and it has been a topic for a couple of months. The boat, the electrification was really the primary thing. And I wanted them to share it with the harbor committee and the harbor master and the select board or liaison and any other members that wanted to come to make that issue, to present that issue to that core group, because I felt that would have the biggest impact. A big public thing, that would be nice also.
Well, I actually think that the boat part of it, well, if I was thinking about the general public interest, I think that the resiliency is more grabbing to people right now.
Right.
And so if the focus of their talk is about electrification, then I think doing it here is fine.
Well, right, and that's a more pointed topic. Resiliency is a big deal, and within the context of a harbor committee meeting, we can kind of focus on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but, and then we're back to like, we're gonna show up to talk to the three of us?
No, we're gonna get
I'll be
more.
here.
I'm contacting
I
harbor
don't know
ma-
what horsepower they go up to.
I'm contacting the harbor masters from our mid-coast towns here.
Yeah.
See if they might be interested in coming, Rockport Harbor people.
Yeah.
All
right, sounds good.
So that's the 14th.
Yep.
And regarding the agenda for that meeting, I will circulate some things to you guys.
Yep.
And we can see what we want to focus
I think
on.
we should, I don't know, it sounds like we don't have a whole lot of action stuff, but I think that getting Jeremy or someone to answered a lot of the questions that that we're raising in in the comments about, so what is the process?
Well, I think, getting back to it, all right, I think we need to go to the website, read and understand the ordinance. All right? If you do that, I think it's going to clear up a lot of our questions.
Well, it's a question of, we're not rowing the boat alone. So if we have an interpretation and nobody else does, then
It's not, it's the ordinance. I mean, it's black and white. It's what it says. You know, and it starts out with what our duties and responsibilities
right,
are.
but you're not hearing my equivocation, which is our permits thing is about specific types of structures, and that the floats are not necessarily those types of structures. So if that means that and I don't know how the planning board honestly gets involved in floats, but
Because they're structures.
well, I know as a lawyer what structure is meant to mean.
Yeah.
Structure is not everything that has a nail in it. Structures relate to real estate, and that's why bulkheads and piers and wharfs that
So
are
what they
attached
did,
to it.
okay, they created what's called a land-based float, which is a structure, becomes a structure when it's attached to the land. Okay, a float, it floats out in the center of
No,
the
I
harbor.
understand that,
They're
but
separate, but when it becomes land-based, then it becomes a structure.
And that existing dock that they want to extend is
It's land-based.
land-based.
yes,
So like when you build a pier, okay, and the pier permits, okay, the float at the end of the pier is part of the structure because it's attached to the land. And the reason they did that is because over in Sherman's Cove, you know, people were putting in floats
with a ramp attached to rock.
and and they didn't need a permit for that, right? They just put them in. So that's the definition.
Can I ask a question? You know, Mark is talking a lot about the rules and the governing regulations, but where is there a limit or whatever that, you know, says, well, you can't even apply for something that goes 200 feet out into the harbor? You know, I mean, piers have a limitation.
Yeah.
It appears that, you know, we're talking about whether the floats meet this or that, but nothing about what's the maximum length that they can go.
It's in the standards. It's in the standards, okay? And the catch is that I've brought up several times is there's an exemption for commercial. Okay, so,
But it was the size of the floats, right?
yep.
Did it
No,
talk at all
no,
about
no.
distance from the harbor line?
Yeah, they had a lot of exemptions. Or not a lot, but a couple. All right, in the outer harbor, the float shall not exceed 240 square feet in an area, and no dimension shall exceed 30 feet in the coastal harbor. The float shall not exceed 360 square feet in area, and no dimensional shall exceed 30 feet. All right. That below is per subsection B4 below, the commercial marina is exempt from the B2 requirements.
And the B2 requirements are,
What I just read.
which doesn't at all
Size.
talk about the length into the harbor.
Well, that becomes a question. We shouldn't talk more about this in any way.
Yeah.
I mean, the Lyman Morris application, because theoretically stop that conversation. But do we have other things official?
No.
Then I move to adjourn.
Okay,
Second.
meeting adjourned.
And you all did me a great favor because I was able to kill this thing that I was meant to go to that I didn't want to.